Hi guys, I'm Lauren, and today I'm taking you into the future and maybe even into space. So if you couldn't tell from the title, I'm doing 10 sci-fi book recommendations, but these are going to be structured a little bit differently than other recommendations videos. I'm going to recommend at least one book for each popular genre that isn't sci-fi. That will make a little more sense once I start getting into it, and I hope you enjoy all these recommendations. I think sci-fi is a genre that can be enjoyed for everyone, even if it feels a little intimidating at first, so if you have any recommendations for sci-fi newbies, just leave them below. And also, before I get started on the main video, this is going to be my last time filming in this location in my Dallas apartment. I'm moving next week to my new home and I'll have a brand new setup. By the time this is up, I'll probably be moved. So the first genre category I'm going to talk about is contemporaries. And for this one, I'm going to recommend More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. This book has gotten a lot of attention around BookTube, but I think it's a great starting place if you really love contemporaries and are kind of interested in sci-fi. This book isn't set that far in the future. The only really distinguishing difference, I think, from our current world is that there's this center that people can go to have their memories erased, but it's settled around a romance and it has LGBT characters, so if you're into any of that and want to kind of branch out into the sci-fi genre, you should check this one out. Second category I want to talk about is romance, and when I say romance, I don't mean like the steamy sexy novels. I don't usually read those, and I don't think I'm sure there's some sci-fi that falls into that, but you're gonna have to do your own research on that. I'm just talking about a book that focuses on romance as a relationship rather than the sexual part. So the first book I would recommend for a more romance plot based book is the Selection series. So you can pretty much tell from the Goodreads summary that this is a pretty big romance book, and it definitely is. So I definitely recommend it if you enjoy a romance-focused plot. But in terms of sci-fi elements, I think it's a great introduction because it's not really focused too much on changing technology, because I know that can kind of alienate some people who are new to the genre. It's more focused on how society and government can change, and I think that was a very interesting element of the series. But also the love story was super addicting for me when I read it. It's definitely less of a deep thinking book and more of a book that you'll just fly through really quickly in terms of entertainment value, but if you are interested in sci-fi and kind of want to dip your toes into it, you should pick this one up. The next genre I would like to talk about is historical fiction. Now, this can seem kind of at odds with sci-fi because historical fiction is set in the past and science fiction is generally set sometime in the future. But guess what? There's a sci-fi novel that works for historical fiction, and this one is called The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. But the premise of this book is there is a kind of sub-race of humans who, when they die, are reborn back into their original bodies, but they retain the knowledge of their previous life they just lived. So they're essentially immortal, even though their bodies end up dying at the end of their lifespan because they remember everything from the life they had already lived. It's a kind of lighter sci-fi concept, and it's very interesting. This book just really makes you think about what it means to live and be human and have a specific amount of time on this earth, but also most of the story is set in the 1900s, so that's why it qualifies for historical fiction. And additionally, Claire North is one of my favorite authors right now, and this was the first book I read by her, and I highly suggest it just to anybody who might be a little bit intrigued by the premise. Next category I want to talk about is the thriller. One I want to recommend is Brainjack by Brian Faulkner. This cover is very annoying, but we're gonna go with it. This is a thriller set in a near future where there is a headset you can put on your head to interface with your computer through thoughts, and then it kind of gets into the implications of someone hacking into your brain and groupthink, hive consciousness and stuff, and it's very interesting. It also has to do with terrorism because the main characters are part of a government anti-cyber attack unit. It just has a lot to do with technology in the future and how that might implicate our privacy and our safety as humans. If you enjoy thrillers, or if you enjoy Black Mirror, the Netflix series, you should definitely check this out. It is very fast-paced, very engaging, and I think I read this book in like a day when I got it, and it's still one of my all-time favorites. Next genre is kind of a big subgenre of science fiction. This is commentary or speculative, basically taking an idea and extrapolating it into a future society. And most of these books end up being dystopian of some kind, but they basically make you reflect on how society is structured today and what it means and whether that's a good or a bad thing. For this one, I recommend A Clockwork Orange. This book is a little weird, I'm gonna say off the bat, but it's one of the first dystopians when the genre is being more popularized in the 1980s. If you kind of like Hunger Games or Divergent, I think this is like right in your wheelhouse. There is a little bit of weird slang in it. I'm recommending this because it's one of the shorter ones. I think it's technically a novella because it's a very short novel, but I think it's really thought-provoking and interesting. And if you're also into kind of modern fiction, this is right in your wheelhouse. Also, if you didn't know, if you like dystopian books, you like sci-fi, because that is a huge genre of sci-fi. But also in this category, I wanted to mention a more recent book if Clockwork Orange didn't interest you. And for this, I'm going to mention The Circle by David Eggers. There's a movie coming out recently, and I think it'll be already out by the time I post this. The book is very interesting. It's kind of more on the thriller side now that I think about it. If you're kind of interested in looking into a future in how our online sharing world might evolve, you should check out this book. Can be a little tedious at times, but I still think it's a solid read, and it really makes you think about how much the internet affects our lives and how much we should let it. Next genre I want to talk about is classics. Not everyone likes older books, but if you're into that and want to get into sci-fi, you should totally read The Time Machine. It's one of the first ever sci-fi books written, and it's one of the most popular ones, and has been adapted into several different movies and TV shows. I really enjoyed it. It also has a little bit of commentary on British society, because the main character builds a time machine and travels into a future where there's beautiful people who live on the surface and then uglier people who live down below, and it kind of talks about the class difference in British society at the time it was written. Very interesting, and if you love classics, this is your bridge to sci-fi. Next genre I want to talk about is literary. This is a more meaty genre for people who love literary style of writing, and for this one I'm going to recommend Station 11. This book kind of flips back and forth between the world before a plague strikes humanity and kills almost all of the people on the planet, and the world after the plague and what happens to the survivors and how they're kind of working to rebuild society in their local communities and how they're surviving. Don't worry, it is definitely not a zombie book. It's just a normal plague. Normal plague. It is just a normal plague that kills basically 90% of the population. Like, if society today just crumbled completely, what would happen after that? And the character building and development in this book is stellar. The writing is amazing. I highly recommend it. I flew through this book in about a week. And if you are interested in a more literary perspective on sci-fi, this book is for you. The next three genres I want to talk about are broader based on age groups, so I'm going to go middle grade, young adult, and adults. But these are all books that can be enjoyed by all ages. So for middle grade, I recommend A Wrinkle in Time. I read this book when I was in middle school and absolutely loved it. If you kind of want more meaty sci-fi concepts without the more meaty writing to go with it, because it is geared toward a younger audience. So the basic premise is the main character's father disappears after he invents a device that lets him basically fold 2 points of space next to each other so you can travel really quickly across vast distances. And so Meg, her friend, and her younger brother venture out into outer space to find their father and rescue him from wherever he is, and you get to explore a lot of different planets and worlds and people. It should honestly be on the list of any reader, even if you don't like sci-fi, or even if you really do love the sci-fi. I cannot recommend it enough. And for young adult, the book series I'm going to recommend is Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. This is one of my all-time favorite series, and I am still in love with it, even though I first read it back in, I think, junior high. This is dystopian based, but there's a lot of technology in it, and so that's why I think this is really good for people who just kind of want to dip their toes into it. In this future world, there's pretties and the uglies, and when you turn 16, you get plastic surgery to turn yourself into a permanently pretty person who never really ages beyond, I think, like 30. Pretties are viewed as full members of society, while uglies are viewed as kind of a down class. The main plot kicks off when the main character meets up with this girl who is a part of the kind of underground who is against the plastic surgery. It's a very interesting dystopian, but it's also a really good story, so if any of the sci-fi elements kind of turn you off, I suggest you pick it up anyway. And my adult recommendation is more romance oriented once again, but I recommend The Time Traveler's Wife. This is kind of a light sci-fi book because it's not really set in the future. It's just you meet a person who has the ability to travel through time based on his genes rather than a device. Once you accept that premise, you're basically good because it's technically just set in modern day except for that section, and it's a really good romance, and if you've already seen the movie, you'll probably really enjoy the book as well. And that is all of my recommendations for sci-fi newbies. I hope you are intrigued and want to pick up any of these books. If you've already read these books and think they're good or think they're bad, leave a comment below. Also, please leave a comment if you have any other books that I didn't mention that would be great for people who are new to sci-fi. And I'm also interested, if you already really love sci-fi, what book kind of turned you on to the genre? If you are interested in sci-fi at all, I hope this video was helpful. And I hope that you enjoy at least one of the books on here. And I also hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.